So let me introduce our guest, and then we're just going to dive right in with questions, and we'll have questions from the audience as well. So Deidre M. Henderson became Utah's 9th Lieutenant Governor in January of 2021. Just seemed like the other day in some ways and not the other day in other ways. Prior to her election as the second highest official in the state, she served for 8 years in the Utah State Senate, representing South Utah County. During her years in the Utah Senate, Lieutenant Governor Henderson gained a reputation as a strong conservative, a champion for government transparency, and a vocal advocate for women and families. She served as chair of the Senate Rules Committee, the Revenue and Taxation Committee, and the Education Committee. Her efforts gained recognition by numerous civic groups, including Legislator of the Year by the Fraternal Order of Police and Tax Advocate of the Year by the Utah Taxpayers Association. In 2020, she was named a Libertas, is that how you say it?
Libertas.
Libertas Institute Defender of Liberty. And Lieutenant Governor Henderson and her husband Gabe are long-term residents of Spanish Fork, and they have 5 children, 3 sons-in-law, and are expecting their first grandbaby. So again, welcome, and I would love to get started. Thanks so much for coming today.
Thank you.
I know you have a busy schedule. Let's start today by having you talk about your own, I love this question. I have written books where we talk about these things for women leaders around the world, actually. But I would love to have you talk about your own developmental pathway in becoming a women leader and really starting with some of the early things in your life, some of the early developmental, childhood through college years that really helped you maybe see yourself as a leader, help you gain confidence, help you think about those things. I would love to have you start with that.
Well, thank you, Dr. Madsen, and it's an honor to be here, and I love the work that you do. You and I have been friends for many years, and I really admire you, and I'm grateful for the important work that you do. So I got married really young. I went to BYU. I love the Aggies. Go Aggies. But have a daughter who is an Aggie, but did end up at BYU, but got married after my freshman year. I did what I swore I would never do.
Freshman year.
I was 18 when I got married, almost 19, 6 weeks away. But I got married young, and I had to do what probably a lot of women have had to do, which was to put my own goals and ambitions on hold. And I left school. I worked a couple of jobs to try to put my husband through school, got him through physical therapy school, and I had 5 babies in 8 years. And so I was really in the thick of things with children and family for a lot of years, and always thought that I would go back to school when my youngest child went to school. But life has a funny way of taking you on a kind of a curvy, winding journey, which is what happened to me. So I never thought, I'm gonna be in public office. I'm going to have this kind of straight path to something. I never really knew what the future was going to hold. Just kind of took things as they came. But I did start, when my youngest did start school, I did start getting involved in local politics. I really wanted to get involved in politics. I was kind of a political junkie. I loved that stuff. And
even growing up?
Growing up, no, I never paid attention to politics growing up. My mother didn't ever want to talk politics. We didn't talk politics as a family, except for my grandma, who was in the 1980s. She was an early Rush Limbaugh supporter. And my family was all worried about, whispering about grandma, and she likes Rush Limbaugh. And this was back when he had a TV show, I guess, in the 80s. Anyway, I do remember that. But we didn't really do politics as a family. And so I just wanted to get involved. I didn't know how to get involved, but I kind of on accidentally met someone who was running for Congress and volunteered to make phone calls for his campaign. one thing led to another. I ended up becoming his political director that year. And then after he was elected to Congress, I became his campaign manager, and I ran his political operation out of my laundry room in Spanish Fork for about 4 years.
Let me ask you a follow-up question. So what ages were your kids? Talk about, like, were you in the mix of things? Did you wait till they were all in school? Did you carry them around on your hip?
So my youngest was 4 when I started that. And I will say I did do local government not government, but local community things. So I was on the theater board in Spanish Fork for a number of years, which was kind of my first experience really getting involved in the community. And that was a really good experience. I met a lot of people. I learned about how some of the local government stuff worked. But it wasn't anything that I ever thought would lead anywhere. I just, helped with the community play every summer, and that was great fun. I actually starred in a couple of them, which was fun, but really not great, which is why I don't do that anymore. But I, because of the volunteering and the, kind of stepping out of my comfort zone and learning a lot of things about how local politics and state politics work, it helped prepare me for when the last redistricting, we're going through redistricting now, and the last redistricting that occurred, there was a new Senate seat that popped up in the middle of where I lived, South Utah County. And so I thought, well, I think I'm gonna run for that. And I was really terrified to do it, and I almost didn't. Multiple times I almost didn't, but I ended up getting some good encouragement and deciding to go ahead and throw my hat in that ring. And
but you had some practice because you were working with this senator, right?
Congressman.
Getting elected. So you kind of knew the process at least. You weren't going in absolutely
right.
blind. And you probably knew it was going to be some work.
Yeah. Yes, my volunteering for that year of volunteering, I did volunteer for free for a year. I worked way too many hours for free, but it gave me this experience that I needed to help prepare me for when those opportunities did come. There's no way I would have probably even decided to run for the Utah Senate had it not been for that, and I certainly wouldn't have won because I wouldn't have known how to go about doing it.
I love that. I just want to ask you one more question about your junior high and high school. As you look back, even anything, you ran for office once, but did you, I've studied through the years the types of things like speech and debate or sports or band or those things that actually prepare in some way. I know we're pulling back a little bit, but I'm so interested in that.
Yeah, so I did drama, I did theater.
See?
And I do remember in 7th grade, I had Miss R, we called her Miss R, Miss Richardson. She was a little scary, but we all loved her. And she taught drama, but she also taught communications. And I took a communications class from Miss R my 7th grade year, and that actually was really helpful. She would make us get up and practice speaking in front of people. And I did try speech and debate for a minute, but that wasn't all that interesting to me. I liked performing on stage. Mm-hmm. And I actually even worked at has anybody been to the Desert Star Playhouse? Yeah. Heard of it? So I actually worked there, melodrama theater, and it really helped prepare me for a life in politics.
I love it. I love it, but there are some connections with things. And even in the research that I did, I interviewed for one of my books, 10 women governors, actually. And the one job that they felt like had the most paid work that they thought helped them prepare to be a leader was actually a waitress. Oh. Because they started having to be nice for money, for tips. And so I thought that was interesting. Thank you for that. So in general, and you talked about some already, but what unpaid experiences do you think have connected you to learning leadership? And that can include even motherhood. I've done research on that. So as you think about unpaid, which is a lot of life, right? Yeah. What connections can you see that prepared you, maybe just even in terms of your confidence or your interest or any of those things?
Well, there's a lot that prepared me, and maybe nothing huge except that, volunteering for a congressional campaign. But even then, I feel like I was prepared for that by some of the smaller things that I did throughout my life in church service. Certainly being in charge of things for my kids' school. My kids were in show choir, and I used to help, with that and helping with costumes and things like that for their show choirs, and of course being on the theater board in the community, and just small things. Really, it doesn't take something, I don't think, drastic and huge always to prepare you, but it's a compilation of the little things that people do throughout their regular day-to-day lives, I think, that really can prepare them for something bigger down the road.
And then you didn't start small. When you decided to run for office, right? You went straight for the Senate. Talk about that. Did you win the first time? And some of the things within your political, like you've served on and you've chaired various committees. Did you know what you're doing at the first? Did you learn throughout the process? I see that you were on the taxation committee. Is that something when you grew up, you just had dreams that you wanted to work in tax?
No.
I figured.
I didn't. Look, I learned a long time ago that I had to step outside my comfort zone in order to become better at things, and that's what I really have tried to do throughout my life. But I started volunteering, and that's where that came in. As I mentioned, I got married young. I dropped out of school after my freshman year, and I took independent study courses and whatnot here and there. But I use this term very lovingly, I was in baby jail for 13 years. I did nothing but wipe noses and bottoms, really. And that's what I wanted to do, but it was like all encompassing. But throughout that, I had these experiences, and then I always say I'm really glad I didn't know in January of 2008 what I was signing up for when I raised my hand to volunteer to make a few phone calls for this congressional candidate. I'm glad I didn't know in advance, because if I would have known in advance, I would not have done it. But I'm really glad I did it, because that did open up doors for me later, just because of the things that I was able to learn, the experiences I was able to get, the people I was able to meet. So I wasn't qualified to go be someone's political director, but he was desperate. He didn't have money. And a whole bunch of women actually ran that campaign.
Really?
And all volunteer and got some great experience. When I became a senator, when I was elected to the Senate, the Utah Senate, because I was in the majority party, everybody in the majority party in the Senate got to chair a committee. So I had, our Senate president at the time was a friend. He'd been a mentor. He'd been very supportive of me. And he asked me what committees I wanted to be on. And I told him I wanted to be on the Business and Labor Committee. I wanted to be on the Revenue and Taxation Committee. And he called me thinking there's no way they're going to give that to me because I'm a freshman. And there are a lot of other people that are good at that stuff.
Those are big,
right?
Those are important.
So I just, went for the stars. And he called me a little while later and said, I'd like you to chair the Revenue and Taxation Committee. And I was terrified because I would be the only woman on the committee, for one thing. The other members of the committee we had the president of the Utah Taxpayers Association sat on the committee. Another one of the senators was an accountant. Another one was a tax attorney. So here, what do I know? So I was terrified, but I called my dad, who said, you got this. And then I got a copy of the tax code and I read it, which is riveting, by the way. I recommend it highly to everybody. Also, before I was even sworn into office in the middle of January, I started having meetings with the committee staff. And what I lacked in, intuitive knowledge about the tax system in Utah or about how to chair a committee, I made up for in preparation. And so I worked really hard. We held, the committee staff helped me through all of that. They held mock committee hearings for me. So I practiced before my first one. Several years later, one of the members of that committee, one of the senators, came up to me. He's like, Deidra, you were just a natural. You were such a natural at that Revenue and Taxation Committee. I couldn't believe it. You knew how to chair everything. You knew the tax code. I just couldn't believe how talented you were. And I'm like, are you kidding me? There was nothing natural about that. I worked really hard to be prepared for the assignments that I was given. And I think that's one thing that's so important, especially I think for women to remember, is they don't have to know everything about everything before you step into the space to do it. It's okay to learn along the way, to learn as you go, and to not be afraid of that. That I feel like is personally for me something that could potentially hold me back, is that, I don't know about that, so I'm just not gonna do it. But that's something that we need to embrace and just step into those spaces and learn about things as we go, but work hard and be prepared.
A quick follow-up. So many women, and you've maybe even heard me talk about this, but many women, we like to be prepared, but sometimes we're over-preparing. We have those perfectionistic tendencies. Some of you are smiling. I see you connect with this. Over-prepare, not really wanting to step out there because it's like, maybe I'm not prepared. I need to do a little more work. How did you, if you did, struggle with that? But you probably didn't even have the time. I mean, you're taking care of 5 kids and doing all of this stuff. You just had to move forward at some point. Any thoughts?
I mean, that's the key. At some point, you have to just trust yourself. You have to trust your instincts, and you have to be okay with not knowing something. You have to be okay with the an answer to a question being, I'm not sure. I'll get back to you. You have to be. I guess I term it brave enough to fail, right? Yeah, exactly. You have to be okay with failure, and I've had my share of failure as well, and sometimes we learn a lot more from those failures than we ever do from the successes or the preparation that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. You said a little bit ago that you had no idea when you were younger that you would go down the route of even running for public office, probably at any level, right? Yet, being willing to step forward when you were asked to be in this position now. When along your journey did you, first of all, think about running? It's probably just like a few months maybe before you went. And then did you think about becoming lieutenant governor? I mean, when did that even come to your mind that was a possibility that you could aspire for? Talk about that.
Well, I think that what was critical for me, honestly, was even when I started to maybe think, I could do that. It was really important when other people reaffirmed that to me and said to me, you should consider running for office someday. You should consider doing that. It's not as hard as it might seem, and you shouldn't be intimidated by that.
Was that when you were volunteering?
Yes, it was, and it was close. Well, I was not volunteering. I was actually being paid then after that first year. I ended up getting paid, but it was during that time when that seed was kind of planted. And as far as lieutenant governor, I mean, it's just, that's not something you aspire to. Nobody aspires to be lieutenant governor, let's just be honest here. But it's great, and it's a total honor, and I love it. But it was something that, Spencer Cox, then Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox, last year after the legislative session ended in March, asked me to join him on his team as his running mate. And so, but I was up for re-election in my third term, in the Utah Senate. I'd been serving for 8 years, and I had to make a decision because the filing deadline was just a few days later. Do I run for an easy re-election to the Senate? I know I'll win that. I know I can spend 4 more years making a difference, doing what I've loved. I loved serving in the Senate most of the time. And or do I take a risk? Because it was a tough race. There was absolutely no guarantee. Do I take a risk and risk something maybe bigger and better, but something certainly not sure. And I decided to go ahead and take that risk. I had to be okay with losing. I had to be okay with losing, and I had to be okay with giving up my Senate seat to go on and do something else. And I came to terms with that. I had to come to terms with that pretty darn quickly. But I had run also for Congress. There was an open congressional seat in 2017. I ran for that. Obviously, that didn't work out very well for me. And it was a growing experience, and growing experiences are probably always, very painful, and I learned a lot. But all of those experiences help prepare for the next step, which is something I think is beautiful about life.
I have to tell you that for me, just my perspective, I just think you're right where you're supposed to be. You're right where you're supposed to be. And so I'm glad you lost that Congress seat. Sorry to put the sword in a little deeper, but I think you're at the right place for the right time for all Utahns. But what a great example. Like I said, I spoke at an elementary school this morning and held up your picture. So this is so cool that we have a woman as lieutenant governor. Now, I have a couple of more questions. I have plenty, but I want to ask a couple more questions. And then we'll start taking a few questions from the audience. So Marin is on that side, Angie's back there. If you have a question that burning, they've got pencils and index cards, and that's how we'll do the questions today. So feel free to do that. I'll keep going though. Nobody's moving, like running over to get one. So they're like, Dr. Madsen will have plenty of questions. So, but feel welcome. So now let's talk really about your current role and today. The first thing is, I've been such a proponent through the years of women going to college, girls preparing for college, young women, going to college, and you had to drop out. But are you still in college today, or have you finished? Talk about education and why you came back and why you think it's so important for Utah women.
Thank you. It is important. And yes, I did drop out. And I'm of the generation, I hate to say that, but it was pretty common. The women, if you get, especially around here, if you get married young, you put your education on hold and you work and get your husband through because you're just going to be home with the kids. I mean, that kind of those things were said to me. Not, my parents had good intentions, but I had no support to go back to college at all after I got married, and we were very poor. And just struggling with all sorts of things in life, and getting Gabe through, and getting our kids here, and so like I mentioned, I did do independent study here and there. Thought that when my youngest went to school, I would go back to college, but by then I was working for a member of Congress. And so 2014, it was the fall after my second legislative session, I decided to go back, take a class on campus. I was a political science major. I went to a political science class. It was a big class at BYU, 75 people or something in there. One of the first few days of classes, the political science department heads came into the classroom, and they recognized me, like waved at me as they were walking in, and probably thought I was there not as a student, but for some other purpose. And I listened to them talk to all of us about internship opportunities, legislative internship opportunities. And I was sitting there as they talked about it, and I realized with just horror, and I also thought it was kind of funny, that I didn't qualify to be my own intern in the state senate. I could be the state senator, but not the state senator's intern. And I was horrified by that. And when I was elected, there was this huge talk, constant talk about what a problem it is that women aren't graduating from college, and it's just a real problem, especially me. Here. It was you, Susan, and it was everybody, right? Yeah. So I was always so afraid that someone would find out my big secret, that I hadn't graduated from college, and I was so ashamed and terrified of it. But it was this moment, sitting in that class, that I went, you know what? That's ridiculous, first of all, and second, I'm not the only person, that's certainly not the only woman who has been in this situation. Has had to give up some of the things that I wanted to do in order to put some of my family priorities before my own. And so I decided to just, what the heck, be open about it and started really talking a lot about it. In 2019, I went back full time. Like, it has been way too long. I'm just gonna get it done. And so I started going. It was really hard. I changed my major to history. People would say, oh, what are you focusing on in history? And I'd say, well, whatever classes I can take on Tuesdays or Thursdays during the fall semester, because the winter semester was the legislative session, and I had committee hearings on Wednesdays. And so anyway, it was not easy to be a non-traditional student at that stage in life. And I was set to graduate this April, but last year kind of blew that up a little bit.
Yes.
Statewide race, pandemic legislating. I also got COVID, was on oxygen for 3 months. I had 3 back surgeries. And anyway, a lot of stuff happened. I did do an internship in the Lieutenant Governor's office earlier this year, which was great. Got some credit, it was fantastic. Wrote my papers, did my thing. So I have 2 classes left.
Oh, wow.
Two classes, both of which I took last fall, but on my 3rd hospitalization, I finally did a medical withdrawal. Okay. So I just have to do the assignments of those, and then I'm set to graduate in December of this year, after 29 years, if I can get those done.
Oh, that's so awesome. Oh my gosh. So that is an awesome story. I mean, it's the perseverance. But the example you're setting for so many. So just very quick comment, if you have any about, why do you encourage women to get those certificates and then hopefully continue to those associates? I was at this elementary school this morning and I said, what's the first degree you get if you get a certificate? And so there were 4th graders, associates, bachelors, and so forth, to really prepare. A lot of people think it's about getting a job, which is really important. But any other thoughts about why our Utah women, even people in the audience, maybe you can return even when you're a little bit older. You're still young though.
Well, it is important, not just because women need to be economically empowered to take care of themselves and their families, but because it's enriching. And I would never want anyone to put off their education because of this, but I'm a much better student now than I was when I was 18, and I love it. I love every class, from my geography class to my food science and nutrition class that I had to take, and I find everything so much more relevant now than I did before. So I just enjoy learning, and I think that is important, but it's also important to make sure that women are, even women who desire to be home with their children and not working outside the home while their kids are young, you never know what's going to happen economically, you don't know what's going to happen health-wise or marriage-wise. It's important for women to be economically empowered.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about your returnship for just a minute?
Yeah. So one of the things, in my experience, getting back into the workforce after wiping the noses and bottoms for so long, and not really knowing how to go about doing that, I decided in my office as Lieutenant Governor that we would launch an initiative. It started out just as just going to be from my office, and then we decided, let's make it bigger. Let's make this bigger. Want to make sure that women have opportunities. And sometimes when you've been out, even women with advanced degrees, or if you've been out of the workforce for an extended period of time, whether it's to raise kids or to take care of aging family members, or if your spouse is in the military or whatever, it's hard to get back in without current relevant experience to put on your resume. And I wanted to launch a returnship program. It's called Return Utah, and we launched that in April. I've actually got my first returner here, Donna Simasing. Today's her last day because she got a job and is leaving us, which was the whole point of the returnship program. So what it is an internship, basically, but for older adults who have more life experience, and opportunity is a very important thing for me. It's an important thing for our administration, and we wanted to make sure that we were providing more opportunities for people who have valuable skills, life skills, and experience that don't translate well onto a resume, and give them some opportunities to get involved and launch themselves off into their own careers and job opportunities.
I love it. I know you're passionate about that, and congratulations. What a great returnship to be able to do. Do you have some questions from the audience? Okay. So we will have one mic for all of us. Sorry, it's a little awkward.
Very hard to choose. I think this is a great one.
Hi.
In the height of the COVID-19 lockdowns, it was said that other countries have social safety nets and the U.S. has women. What are your thoughts on that statement, and what do you think is the best way to support women in families in Utah?
What a great question.
That is a great question, and so true. I think we all know that women really bore the brunt of this pandemic. They lost more jobs. I think it was 2 to 1 here in the state of Utah. They bore the burden, especially when kids were still are. When kids were out of school and had to do the virtual learning, it's been a real struggle for women, and it unfortunately kind of set us back a little bit from some of the progress that was being made. I think some of the things that we can do and need to be doing, and I've been fighting for, but one person can never do anything in government, which is a good thing.
In some way.
In a lot of, it is a good thing, but we just keep trying to bring people around to our perspective, is to make sure that we are being family friendly in the workplace here in the state. And I think there's nothing more family friendly than policies that allow for paid maternity leave, paid family leave, right? Whether you're a dad or a mom having a baby, to have those to, one of the things that I promoted and was able to help get passed during my last legislative session was allowing for the Department of Health to do a pilot project that allowed for new moms to bring their babies to work for the first few months so that they could feel like they could go back to work. We lose women sometimes after they have babies because there's such a demand for childcare. So working on access to childcare and making sure that we have good family-friendly policies in place is something that we can and should continue to do. I think part of the reason why maybe we haven't had real awesome family-friendly policies in place before is really a matter of perspective. We're missing women's voice in government, where those decisions are being made at the state level. It's not that a man's perspective is somehow bad or wrong. It's just not complete. And some of those things just aren't considered or thought about because that's not been their life experience. And so getting more women involved in policy making and sitting at the table to have these sorts of decision making power is really important.
Yeah. We are this year 40th in the nation. And many of you probably heard in probably a month ago, the Utah Wallet Hub. Utah's the worst state in the nation, again, for women's equality, but in the state legislature, we're 40th out of 50 states, and many other things. We're doing some reports on that. Also, I did want to also say that I do think the state of Utah is family friendly in certain ways. The outdoor recreation that we have, the family activities that we have, but I will just reiterate what you said in terms of policies. We are not family-friendly policies, childcare, leave policies, those things. So if any of you are interested in that, we're rolling out a series of white papers where we look at all 50 states and their policies, and then look at Utah's and really put some recommendations together for legislators. So just wanted to do that pitch on there. If COVID has done anything good, which I don't think it has very little. But the one thing is that we're talking about childcare now. We're talking about leave policies. We're talking about things that were not talked about before.
Well, and on top of that, I think we're talking about workplace flexibility. And I think that's huge, because we've always had this kind of set mindset on what it means to go to work.
Yes.
And now we've had to rethink some of that. And I think that can be incredibly family friendly, to have remote working, flexible hours, just a change of mindset that I think is incredibly helpful and good for women.
Thank you. Do you have another question, Mary?
Yeah, this was a great segue. I've encouraged a few amazing women to run for public office. There are not enough women serving. They decline for fear that they won't win, having to deal with angry constituents on their doorstep as an elected official. How did you develop that strong leadership to handle those challenges and confidence in yourself?
Oh, excellent.
That is a good question. And I want you to know that while I might look confident and totally sure of myself, I don't always feel that way. And sometimes you just fake it till you make it. Is that okay to say? Because, I don't ever want anyone to look at me or anyone else and compare themselves and think, I can't do that because I'm not that confident. It comes with practice, and it's not always easy. But in terms of running for office, running for office isn't for everybody, but it may be for you. It may be for you. One thing that I did learn, that I remember my freshman year in college, there was a speaker that came to speak, and one of the things he said literally changed my life, and it was, don't take counsel from your fears. So that has been my mantra all this time. And whenever I encounter something that scares me, that's my little red flag, to take a step back and think, well, maybe I need to do this. Because sometimes it's that fear that holds you back. It's that fear of failure. It's that fear of being ridiculed. That's that fear that you might not know the answer. But that's the red flag for me. When I feel that, and I do still on a regular basis, feel that fear, that is my check on myself to say, I'm gonna go ahead and do it anyway.
I love it. I think I'm going to add, don't go far, Maren, and still submit your questions. We still got a little time. I'd like to have these an hour and 15 minutes, so we have a little extra time. I want to, and you've talked a little bit about this, but I want to get this question in, specifically about women in leadership. Why do you think it's so important for women to lead today? And obviously in politics, you were just talking about that. You can say more about that, but in other positions. And secondly, do you think it's even more important today than in past years?
Well, it's maybe more important today than in past years, just because we're here today. We can't do anything about the past, right? But there's so much divisiveness and tribalism and manufactured outrage that's happening right now, that's really troubling. And what, Susan, you're gonna have to speak to this, but I've seen studies that have shown that women in leadership positions, they help bring peace to situations, right? They help resolve issues. It's a different feel. And that collaborative approach that women tend to have is really helpful in solving really big problems. And I could list all sorts of examples if we had time, or if we do have time, I'm happy to dive into that. But I think that women bring something different, not just their perspective, but the manner in which they go about solving problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I experienced that in the legislature. I'm experiencing that now in my current office as Lieutenant Governor. There are a lot of issues that can't be solved simply by saying, dang it, this is the way we're gonna solve it. You have to listen to other people. You have to bring sides together. You're not always going to agree with them, but you also don't know everything. Nobody knows how to do everything, and we all might have a solution, a problem in mind that needs to be solved, and there are a million different ways to solve it. And coming to the agreement on how that is going to be solved is something that I think is a superpower of many women.
And I will make a comment about the peacekeeping. I did way before the pandemic. Do you remember back then? Anyone? I actually did a keynote for a conference in India at an ashram, if you know what that is, kind of a temple where we stayed. And the keynote was specifically about women at the tables of peacekeeping and what the research said. And there's absolute evidence even at the level of countries, when women are at the table, even one starts making a difference, but two, one on both sides, things change. The research has said when the actual, peacekeeping agreements, what are they called exactly? Treaties, thank you. I knew it was an easy word. The treaties, actually, when women, you get there faster in many ways because there's not as much aggression when women are in the room, and they last longer, like 10 years versus 5 years. There's evidence to show that. So oftentimes, you've been talking about failure and some different things. We just have to use our voice and lean in just because we know it's good for community, it's good for our families, it's good for other people to lean in and have our voices, right? And we can't keep saying, oh, it's someone else do it. Right. And thank you for being one of the people that said, maybe, let's have someone else do it, but I need to do it too. Maren?
How can we collaboratively create positive change concerning pay equity in Utah?
Oh, good one. That's a really tricky one in Utah.
It is. There's a lot of feelings associated with this when it gets brought up in certain circles. One of the things that our administration has done is make sure that our cabinet members take a deep dive and look at their own organizations. And when we talk about in Utah, that's not just state government, but that is, I feel like state government should lead on this if we're not following. Yeah. So, and I know that there are some private sector businesses that are doing very well on this, but we should be leaders ourselves. And so we've been doing deep dives to make sure that we do have equity in pay. And it was really revealing to a lot of our cabinet members when they did this. Many of them, probably all of them, assumed that they didn't have that happening, right? That they're not intentional. But what we found is it does happen. And what was concerning to me more than pay equity, if the pay equity seemed to be there for equal jobs, what was really concerning to me was opportunity equity. We had lack of leadership positions among women. Like maybe all the women are doing, some of these lower jobs, and they're all getting paid just as much as each other, or I guess a man doing something similar, but in the upper levels of government, in those leadership positions, do we have some equity there? Or is it, male dominated? And a lot of them were very surprised when they looked at it through that lens to see what they found. And I think that a lot of these problems occur not because people are malicious, although that has happened, but because people in those top spots don't see it. They don't experience it, and so they're not looking for it. And that happens all over the place. And I'm going to give you, I didn't know if I wanted to share this story, and I have to be careful because the person involved is a really great person. But it's an example of not seeing something that's there until you do, until it's pointed out, right? So when I was first elected to the state senate, it was before I was even sworn in, like a week before, we had a fundraiser for all the majority senators. And it was this huge thing at the Grand America where each senator was sitting at a different table. There's like 500 people there.
I know this story.
And we had our newly elected Senate leadership sitting on stools on a stage much like this, and they were answering questions on cards that the audience members wrote down. And one of the questions they got, a newly elected member of our Senate leadership said, oh, we're gonna have our new Senator Deidre Henderson come up and answer this next question. And I was sitting clear at the back of the room at a table, and I thought, oh wow, they want me to answer a policy question. So I picked my way through the 500 people and came up to the stage and was handed a microphone, and the question was, if this were the dating game, which of these senators would you pick?
I know, people are in shock. Look at their faces. Oh my gosh.
This was 9 years ago. But I said, I was shocked. And I said, why are you asking me this question? And then I said, you're all winners, handed the microphone back, and went back to my seat. And by the time I sat down, I was shaking. I was so humiliated. I was so embarrassed and angry. And not just angry because that was said to me, a woman, a married mother with 5 children, but because I had been elected to represent 100,000 constituents in my Senate district, and they deserve to have their voice heard and their representative taken seriously. And it was shocking to me to be asked something like that. Now, the guys sitting at my table, all men, were angry on my behalf. We had a meeting right after this event with the majority senators, and I walked into that and I was still just like reeling from this experience, and not a single one of them, all men, said anything to me. No one said anything until it hit the news. Someone had tweeted about it or something.
Of course.
And after that, the senator responsible, who I'd never thought he was anything other than incredibly supportive of me and respectful toward me. He came up to me afterward and he said, I'm really, in a way, glad that happened, because I now see things that I didn't think were there. I didn't believe they were there. And then I did it. And now I see it. And so when it comes to pay equity or any of those things, I think it's really hard to make things happen until people start looking for them. They start to see it and notice it. Anyway, it's a long way to answer that question.
That's a great story. And a lot of times, I mean, you've all heard the conversations on unconscious bias, and I still have people today say to me, oh, I'm sure I have a little unconscious bias. Well, what we know from the data is that 11 million pieces of information come at us at one time. We absorb 40 to 50. We are only conscious of 5 to 7. So how much is unconscious? Most. Until we bring that, try and move that unconscious to conscious. I did want to put a pitch in. We're going to have, we collected data a year ago summer from about 1,000 women in Utah on sexist comments and behaviors. So we have about 1,600 different stories, and we've been coding for a year. So we're going to start rolling them out, not just so we can say shame on you, right? And they're not all from men. 87% are from men, though. And we collected who gave them, what age and all of that. But what a tool for us as women, because we're going to have responses too. How do you respond? And a good tool for men, because sometimes we're not sure. Was that a little sexist? My husband and I, he just finished a doctoral program, and when we're walking, I'm like, are you trying to mansplain me? He's like, yes, I'm mansplaining right now. So we have kind of a fun thing going. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that story. I know that you've told me that before, and it's just shocking, but it happens. Maren, any other questions? I've got a couple more, but we have, a few more minutes.
As a woman in the planning process of starting a new business, what programs are available to me on a state level?
Oh, good question. Do you know them all?
Yeah, go to goutah.gov. I'm really being put on the spot on this one.
I can help if you need.
Business.utah.gov, thank you. See, I don't know. We do have a lot of resources, and we have an entire office, the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. We just changed the name of it. It used to be GoEd, and so now it's Go Utah.
Go EO.
We've changed so many. Anyway, so we do have an office, and that's what they do. They look for these opportunities, a way to support small businesses, helping them with the grant process and other tools. So we do have a lot of resources for women. Yeah.
And our website at the Utah Women in Leadership Project, I do know my project, has so many things on the website, so many people to go to, but I love the Women's Business Center of Utah that's housed in the chamber. They are statewide, and you're thinking about a business or whatever, there's so much advice there, and so many, we just have a lot of resources through government funding, but also others as well, and networks. So on our website, utwomen.org. Do I sound like I've done that before
yes,
on the radio?
Yes, you do. That's great.
So, that's great. And by the way, we really are a great state for women to start businesses on. And, we do have this help, but also one of the things we do need to work on, though, is that women, when you look at the details of women who start businesses and men who start businesses, men get a lot more venture capital. Women sometimes don't even ask, and then often when we're asked, we're judged, right? Why is she asking? But also, back to the pay thing, we actually, as women, when we start businesses, we pay ourselves less than men who start businesses. So think about that. So, yeah. Did you have a follow-up to that?
I was just going to say, there's also Women's Business Center of Utah for the Salt Lake Chamber.
That's,
that one has lots of.
Again, the Women's Business Centers of Utah. I was just with Anne Marie Wallace, who heads that yesterday. That's fabulous. So, in terms of, I just wanted to ask you what some of your thoughts are in terms of how girls, young women, and women can develop leadership in thinking about your own life, but you've got some daughters, right? Mm-hmm. How many daughters?
4.
Oh.
5 kids, 4 daughters.
Okay, 4 daughters, 5 children. As you've seen them grow up and develop their voices, what are some of the favorite things that you've seen that you think are opportunities, even for younger girls and young adults, in really developing leadership and their confidence? I know it's a shift.
Well, there are a lot of things. I mean, Girls State, I had a daughter participate in Girls State. I think, honestly, one of the most important things that we can do for our daughters is expose them to other women who are leaders, women in business, women in government, in all sorts of different areas of leadership. When we think of leadership, oftentimes we, as in the general public, think of men. And it's important for girls to see women leading. A number of years ago, I was in Washington, D.C., visiting the Library of Congress. And the Library of Congress is an incredibly beautiful building. But I started to get a little disturbed when I kept seeing all these statues of men, Moses and Plato and everybody, real men. And all the women statues were allegorical depictions of civic virtues, like, I don't know, commerce and law and history, and it was very stark to me that there were very few representations of actual women in Washington, D.C., and I started looking around the city for those and around the state. And so I think if we want our women and girls to see themselves in leadership positions. And it's not because there aren't women who did things worthy of having a statue made of them, right? But it's just because we don't tell those stories. So one of the things that I love and that I've helped champion is like Better Days 2020,
yes,
right? Who have worked over the past few years to really excavate and dust off and shine light on the stories of women in Utah's past. And that's really important. So making sure that we have those in our curriculum, and making sure that we're teaching not just girls, but boys too, about some of the incredible women of Utah's past. Those are things that are really important to helping young people see themselves reflected in leaders and see themselves as potentially being leaders someday.
I love that. I know you were such a big proponent of the Better Days 2020, as was I. But learning about the history of, and most of you know that, but and you've probably said it many times, of the suffrage.
Yeah.
And being the first state that women could vote, and I always get them mixed up. The first state that women voted, and then it was taken away, and then Wyoming beat us out in one vote or whatever. So I know you've been a proponent of really bringing that history back, so we think about that. Because we're at the forefront, and now we've really are not at the forefront. But one of the things that you and I talked about before you even took office was how do we shift, how do we move the needle in the state to get back to not being the worst state for women's equality, but actually show that these amazing women in the state of Utah and what they do and how we can, but we need some work, right? Any thoughts about that? Or then Maren, do you have another? You have plenty of questions, okay.
Well, I think one of the biggest things, and I've seen such an improvement in this over the past few years, but when I first started getting involved in politics about 13 years ago, really the narrative was, it doesn't matter if it's women or men, it just matters what their principles are, what they believe in. And while those things are important, it actually really does matter that 50% of the population have a say and a seat at the table when it comes to policy making. And so, but when there are so few women at the table, it's not only hard to speak up and hard to, when you do speak up, be actually heard, but there becomes sometimes a scarceness mentality among women at the table. If only one woman is ever at the table, that one woman might tend to think that only one woman can be at the table, and it dang well better be them. And so that's something that, having an abundance mentality when it comes to other women participating in government and sitting at the table, there's lots of room at the table, and we need to be allies with each other. It's totally okay to disagree on an issue with another woman, but don't be the one who publicly shames or continually attacks other women. Be allies with women. Even when you don't agree with what they're saying, have their backs. That's so important, and that has been a piece that's been missing for so long, and I think we're starting to finally recognize that here, at least in the state of Utah, and do better. But that's one thing, be an ally.
It is, you brought up something so important. That scarcity mentality is around really strongly for men and women. The example I will give, right now we have 2 women running for Congress, the Senate. And I have had so many people. And actually, if I would be honest, and I know the research on this, right when I found out the second woman was gonna run, I thought for a second, it just took me like 2 seconds. I thought, oh no. And would we do that if it was 2 men or 3 men? Oh no, they'll take votes from the other man. We wouldn't do that, right? And so just for a second, but I have had probably 20, 30, 40 people in the last couple of months say, well, won't having 2 women in disadvantage the other women? The woman, and that's more this scarcity mentality. I'm like, let's get 3 or 4. Then it's like, oh, we should have a woman. And by the way, that's one of the things we get dinged on in Utah. There's points when you look at why we hit that bottom state in the nation. Some of the points are for, do we have a woman in Congress, in the Senate? Do we have women in the House, which we have none? Do we have women in the state legislature? And the state executive offices, we have 5 in the state of Utah, and we've been at 0 for a long time, and guess what? One person is helping us do a little bit better on that. There's many other things, but just wanted to put that pitch in. All right, Maren, you're on this side, so maybe you'll have to.
This won't be surprising. One of the biggest challenges aspiring women face are barriers to quality childcare and support of a village. What can Utah do to help with this barrier?
Well, that's something that we've been working on. I actually chaired the governor's Early Childhood Commission. And it's something that we are looking at, seeing how can we support that and make more child care possible. It is really tough, especially right now with a tight labor market. It's difficult, and I don't have all the answers. I don't have them yet, but it is something that we're looking at. We're looking at that along with preschool and other things that are helpful. But I think removing some of the barriers to good child care are important. Just at the prison, the new prison that's being built, they decided to put a daycare in there for prison workers. And I love that. And I think at least at the government level, we could be doing more of that. We could be doing more on-site, in-house things. So that's something that we're looking at.
So in terms, just so you know, and everyone else, I told you about the white papers. We have one on wage gap already posted, one on leave policies, all leave policies. But the next one up that should be released in probably 3 weeks is childcare. So looking at and it's complex, what every state is doing and some things that we can do. And I know some of the legislators are thinking about some of these as well. So we're coming to the time that we're gonna wrap up. Thank you for all those questions. Thank you for your attentiveness today and coming. But I would love to have you just, what have you been dying to say that I haven't asked? I've dig deep in some areas, but what would you like to say? And then what advice do you have for all of us today?
Well, I would just like to reiterate the idea that you don't have to run for public office to make a difference in your communities. But we need good people to run for public office. So if not you, then who? Who can you support? Who can you help? And your voice is really, really important. And I also want to say that it's not that hard. It's not that hard to make a difference. Really, very few people really do get in and really roll up their sleeves and figure it out. And when they do, they realize that they can have a lot of say. So get involved in local politics in order to learn the system, in order to make connections. That's how you start laying that foundation. And be brave enough to fail. Don't worry. I mean, be brave enough to fail, but also work like your life depends on it. I mean, there was a city council member, a candidate, a friend of mine a number of years ago, he was running for city council, and I asked him what he was doing for his campaign, and he's like, well, I put out a few campaign signs, and I've just decided if God wants me to be on the city council, then I'll win.
Oh no.
And I will propose that's not a good strategy. He, of course, lost that race. It's kind of like my little 7th grade secretary race. You've got to, yes, be brave enough to step out there and do it, but you also need to work hard and prepare and be smart about how you do it and build allies and build relationships and have each other's backs.
That is so awesome. Thank you. Yeah, it does take some work. I mean, it's amazing though, in my experience, and I haven't run for office, although I remembered the other day I did. I actually was on the ballot right when I moved here for
Oh.
Alpine School District, and then I forgot about it and didn't do anything. But I came in second. So that's not a good strategy to move forward. But what I do know is that it has been interesting in my path to realize how even just one voice, my voice, has changed people's lives in terms of just motivating them to go to college. Maybe some of you in this room, or motivating, or just saying the right thing. And when you change a life, you don't know how many lives that's going to change, because their kids, their kids' kids, and so it's always, it feels a heavy burden in some ways that your voice matters so much individually, but at the level you are. I mean, there's so many things in between, right? Of individual people, city councils, community, or even planning commissions, and then up to lieutenant governor. So thank you for all of that. Thank you to our sponsors again, the Utah Education Network, the Huntsman School of Business, and also USU Extension. Thank you so much again for being here.
Thank you.